And so I'd like to talk a little bit about how the protocol works and what's happened in the last couple of years since I last spoke here about it. And also I'll do a little demo. Now, normally the way you would use this protocol is you would take, you could write your own from scratch using the Internet Draft as a protocol specification, but of course what I'd prefer that you do is use my SDK and put that in your VoIP client or your VoIP application. It could be a PBX or some other kind of thing. And when you do that, it integrates smoothly into the VoIP application and can do secure calls. It uses SRTP as the media encryption. It negotiates the keys at the beginning of the call and does the key negotiations in the media plane. Now, a couple years ago when I gave a talk on this here, that was kind of a radical approach, but the IETF seems to think that that's a good approach now, and other protocols that they were working on take the same approach. But there's a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth to get them to think that it was a good approach. But there is an interesting application that we've got here, ZPhone, which sits in the IP protocol stack and acts as an IP filter and lets you run whatever VoIP client you'd like to run. You could run Apple iChat. It runs on Windows. It runs on Linux. It runs on Apple, Mac OS X. It runs on Windows Mobile. It runs on Symbian for mobile phones. I've seen it run on several Nokia mobile phones. But anyway, this thing sits in the IP stack and lets you run whatever VoIP client you'd like to run. We've got Gizmo running here. We've also got Apple iChat. Just to give you an example of it running on two different VoIP clients. Now remember, these VoIP clients don't have this protocol embedded in it. Rather, we're running the protocol as a separate application that has a daemon running in the protocol stack and intercepting all the IP traffic coming in and out of the machine looking for VoIP traffic. So we're going to do a secure call here, just very briefly, with a friend of mine who's running iChat at the other end. And it's going to do the usual thing it does to set up an iChat video connection here. iChat takes a while to start up a video connection. Steve, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Oh, we don't have much volume here. We can't hear anything. Let's see. Do I got to turn up the volume? Now say something.
Now? Testing 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you should get a little closer to your microphone.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll get the microphone.
All right, so what we've got is a secure connection here so that nobody can hear what we're saying. Oops, I forgot about that. All right. So in order to prevent a man-in-the-middle attack, we have to make sure that we're both using the same session key, because in a man-in-the-middle attack, the attacker gets in between the two parties, and you set up a secure connection with the man in the middle, and the man in the middle sets up another different secure connection with the other party. So you've got two secure connections, both of them connected to the man in the middle, but you think you're talking to the other party. And the way you tell if that's happening is if you have the same session key at both ends, then there is no man in the middle. But if the two session keys differ, there must be a man in the middle. And to tell if these keys differ, we compare the short authentication string to see if it matches. And Steve, on my side, it says allow holiness. That's funny. What a serendipitous thing here. We can do a religious conversion here. Does that match what you have on your side?
That does match what I have on my side, yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to hang up now, and we're going to do another secure call through Gizmo, a different VoIP client, and we'll see how that works.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, now ZPhone has detected the call is ended, and now I'm going to call Steve back. This one will just be audio. That one was audio and video, and it encrypted both audio and video streams. except I don't know if, okay, yeah, the call started. Okay, Steve, can you hear me?
Go. I can hear you fine.
Okay. And let's see if there's a man in the middle here. The short authentication string is snowslide suspicious. I like that better than allow holiness.
Right. Snowslide suspicious. They don't make these so that it's easy to pronounce, eh?
That's right, yes. We could also display these things in base 32 alphanumeric characters, but I chose to use the same word list that we used to compare PGP fingerprints. All right, well, Steve, that's it. You can.
Okay.
You're free to go.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
So, let's see. I guess I should have made this be the default page for this demo. So this is the website for ZPhone. And if you go there, you can download the software that I just demoed. So you can use it on your Mac, your Linux, or your Windows PC to run, to secure any VoIP call from any VoIP client that you already are using now. And it does an ephemeral Diffie-Hellman exchange. There are no persistent keys. It negotiates the keys at the start of the call. It destroys them at the end of the call. What is this? Oh. Yeah. Okay. I'll have to explain that one later. Okay, so anyway, it's ephemeral keys. There's no public key infrastructure. There's no persistent keys of any kind, and it doesn't talk to any servers. In fact, it doesn't use the signaling. It doesn't talk to SIP. In fact, it doesn't even have to look at the SIP packets if you use this application. But of course, if you're integrating it into your VoIP client with the SDK, then you would talk to it through an API, and you would tell it, you know, here's the RTP stream. But all of the protocol is operating through the RTP stream. There's nothing that it needs to do through the signaling. Now, the nice thing about not talking to any servers to negotiate the keys is that the servers are generally owned and operated by the phone companies. Not always. You might have your own server at home. Maybe you've got an Asterisk PBX or something. But, you know, for a lot of people, the phone companies operate the SIP servers, and I just don't feel comfortable trusting them with my cryptographic key negotiations. The whole architecture of this thing is designed to get away from trusting the phone companies. CALIA, Communications Assistance for Law Enforcement Act, which requires phone companies to hand over their cryptographic keys for anything that's encrypted, it doesn't apply to the end users. And with ZPhone or the ZRTP protocol, the keys are negotiated only by the end users. So CALIA doesn't really have much traction against ZPhone. Now, some of you might work for government agencies and might take exception to that. There are reasons why the government has an interest, a legitimate interest in wiretapping. And if they only use that for that and nothing else, it wouldn't be so bad. But we've also been reading in the headlines about massive wiretapping on a grand scale, like at DriftNet phishing. But regardless of the political arguments of whether wiretapping is good or bad, we have to encrypt our phone calls because we're moving away from the public switch telephone network that we've all been using for 100 years, and we're moving it over to VoIP. And while the PSTN was relatively safe from non-government wiretapping, the VoIP environment on the internet is not safe from non-government wiretapping. There's been an asymmetry for a century in the difficulty that the government has in wiretapping versus the difficulty that criminals have in wiretapping. If the criminals want to wiretap the government, it's not so easy. In fact, if the criminals want to wiretap anyone, it's not that easy. They would have to get close to their target. They'd have to get their alligator clips hooked up to the right wires. in some big office building. They got thousands of wires. They have to find the right ones. It's not that easy to do. You certainly can't do it from far away. But the government had a fairly easy time of it. They could go to the phone company and ask for, help, and the phone company would do it at the switch. But that asymmetry and difficulty of wiretapping will vanish as we move from the PSTN to VoIP. It will become possible for organized crime to wiretap and not even have to get close to their targets to do it. One of your PCs in your office network could be infected with specially designed spyware. And I have a link on my website here on the ZPhone Project website on the FAQ page. I have a link to a demo of this kind of spyware. And this spyware could intercept the VoIP traffic on your network and record it on disk as WAV files and make it browsable. You can actually follow the link and browse it with your web browser on a network that has this spyware installed and listen to phone calls yourself. And I don't think they're phone calls that you're likely to find very exciting, but they're just phone calls that were put there for your amusement. Anyway, this means that organized crime can wiretap judges and prosecutors and listen to them discussing ongoing criminal investigations, to talking about witnesses and informants, or maybe just calling their wives at home to talk about what time to pick up their kids at school. So think about what it means when that asymmetry of difficulty of wiretapping vanishes as we move from the PSTN to VoIP. At that point, it becomes possible for organized crime to wiretap the cops. And I think that, I expect that there's going to be some debate from law enforcement about the wisdom of having encryption on a large scale as in our infrastructure of everyone's phone calls. And I can understand why they would be concerned about that, but there could be so much more damage to the criminal justice system if organized crime can wiretap judges and prosecutors. So I think that in the long run, law enforcement is going to have to recognize that it's in their interest to have everyone encrypt their phone calls. So if you have a VoIP client, download this SDK and try it out. Just for evaluating, it's free. And it's also, we're doing an open source GPL licensed version if you have an open source VoIP client or an open source PBX. I'd like to open up for questions now, rather than wait to the end because I want to see what you're interested in. Yeah?
Are you doing anything to get this installed in hardware appliances, like maybe the little routers that come with Vonage?
Yeah, that would be a good place to put it. Yeah, there is. I guess the companies that make those things would have to come and talk to me about that. I do have a licensing arrangement with a company that licenses it to companies that build desktop enterprise phones, and in fact, they're also building a box that's a bump in the wire. It's about this big and has two RJ45 Ethernet connectors on it. One of them goes to the phone, the other one goes to the cloud. And it can sit outside of the VoIP client. This protocol was deliberately designed to do that it doesn't have to be inside the VoIP client. And other protocols were not designed for that purpose, or to be in that place. This is a little bit like the old PSTN encryption approaches, a decade ago, or 2 decades ago, where you have a phone, a PSTN phone which has a built-in modem, and you call somebody and you talk to them, and then you press the secure button, and the modems train up, and then it starts, and then it's got a codec, and it's got a computer in it, and it's got a DSP, and now you're talking through a modem with an encrypted digital channel. But before that, you're just talking on a regular PSTN POTS call. And so that's the way secure phones always worked traditionally on the PSTN. And I thought that was a nice approach, and so I'm doing pretty much the same thing here. I'm doing everything through the media plane and separating it from the signaling. It seems to work pretty well. And also, I can deploy it a lot faster this way. I don't have to wait for it to be fully deployed in everybody's signaling layer. Yeah? Yes, it'll be available from a company called Ripcord Networks. If you go to the ZPhone Project website and go to partners, customers, here we go. You can see Ripcord Networks here, and you can visit their website. And now I don't know if they have anything on their website now about that bump in the wire, but they're working on the product right now. This is a bunch of companies that are working on products that will use this protocol, that use this SDK. It's in Asterisk. They're supposed to be putting it in FreeSwitch, and within a couple of weeks we'll have it in Akiga. And there's other implementations. There's another open source implementation, and they put it into Twinkle, which is an open source VoIP client that runs on Linux. PGP is planning to put it in their future VoIP products, and Borderware has a kind of a SIP security gateway that they're putting it in. So this is going to be deployed quite a bit. I think that VoIP encryption is not going to be a niche product like it would have been a decade ago. Because while PSTN encryption was only used by a few people that wanted to spend a couple $1,000s on a box for their special needs, VoIP is intrinsically vulnerable in ways that the PSTN is not vulnerable, and so it's going to require all of society, all of everywhere in the world, as they migrate to VoIP, they're going to have to start encrypting VoIP. So it's not really a vertical market thing. It's as horizontal as it can get. It's going to become part of the infrastructure. Yeah. Yeah.
How many round trips is negotiation?
Well, let's see. How many round trips does it take to establish the key material? Well, there is a probe that just finds out if the other endpoint has it, which I don't know if it's proper to count that as, because maybe the other side doesn't have the protocol, But once you decide that you want to go secure, there is 1, 2, 3. There's this way, and this way. And then there's a confirmation packet that shows you that it's done. So you could say 2 round trips. But you could also argue that you've got the key exchange in 1.5 round trips. Yeah. Well, Skype has some form of encryption in their protocol, but they won't tell anyone how it works. So I don't have an opinion about it. I generally prefer to use encryption that is published. I like to be able to see what a protocol is before I can trust it. In fact, I go a step further. I prefer not to trust encryption unless not only do they have to publish the protocol, they also should publish the source code. And of course, I do publish my source code. I've always published my source code. That's why PGP, in fact, in 1991, I think PGP was one of the first encryption products that published source code. That was 16 years ago. And I kind of started that tradition. Don't trust any encryption product that doesn't publish its source code. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Skype. Maybe it's perfect. But how do we know that? Yeah, in the back.
Along those lines, how do you trust something like a hardware bump in the wire?
Well, that's a good question. How do you trust a hardware bump in the wire? Well, I'm going to publish my part of it. If some manufacturer takes my SDK and puts it in their hardware, I can't guarantee that that manufacturer is going to publish all their source code because they've got other things in there unrelated to, to my protocol. But I'm publishing my source code, and I generally try to encourage anyone who wants other people to trust their encryption products to publish their source code. So if you get it from me, you're going to get it with all the source code. And if you want to, download the source code and take a look at it, you can do it right now. Now that I'm no longer doing the demo and I don't care about network congestion, you guys can all download it right now. Yeah.
As I looked at the demonstrations, it looks like a major portion of the security of the product assumes that the two speakers verify the existing.
Yes. Well, let me talk about that. We verified it by comparing the short authentication string, which is a hash of the keying material. But it isn't absolutely necessary to do that because how many people here have never used SSH? See, I would have asked how many people here use SSH, but then I wouldn't have been able to tell how many people hadn't used it. So SSH relies on key continuity. The first time you use SSH to talk to some other machine, there is some exchange of keying material that's cached, and if there's no man in the middle in that first exchange, he can't get in later. And I think that's a great way to do it. Because your typical threat model has it that whoever's going to wiretap you takes an interest in what you're doing at some time later in the relationship you have with the other party. And Zphone uses the same thing. The first time you make contact with the other party, there's an exchange of key material that's cached and used in every subsequent calls. Remember I said all the key material is destroyed at the end of the call? Well, before I destroy it, I hash it. And then I store that hashed version of it. The next time I make a secure call, I do a Diffie-Hellman exchange like I always do. But I also mix in the earlier material from the earlier call and thereby inherit the security properties of the earlier call. So if there was no man in the middle in the first call, there can't be one in this call. In fact, if you talk to someone 100 times over the course of a year and you never check the short authentication string because you're lazy, I mean, I usually don't check it, Oops, I shouldn't have said that. Now the wiretappers will know that they can wiretap me. But I frequently don't check it. And so you could just not check it at all and call somebody 100 times over the course of a year. But after a whole year of talking to that person, talking about the weather and about other innocent things that you don't really care if anyone's wiretapping you, one day you're going to talk about something sensitive, and on that day you're going to say, I think we'll check the short authentication string today. And so you check it, and it matches. So that proves there's no man in the middle on that call. But it also retroactively proves that there never was a man in the middle all the way back to the first time you talked to that other party. And that's a really nice security property. It's kind of like never flossing your teeth except the morning you go to the dentist. Where you can wash away your sins of the past year and redeem your dental hygiene. So just check it once when it matters. And it doesn't matter how many times you checked it before. So I predict that hardly anyone will ever check the short authentication string, and who cares? Because most of the time you're talking about the weather. But when you're talking about something important, just check it once, and it will retroactively cover the earlier calls, and it'll cover the future calls, because you don't have to check it next time. I got a call on somebody else. Yes, in the back there. Okay, are there any software patents? Actually, this is an interesting question because I found a way. I hate software patents. I don't know if you followed this, but back in the 90s, PGP was using the RSA algorithm, and that created problems for PGP, and because of the RSA algorithm was patented. I really hate software patents, but I found a way to use a software patent for good instead of evil. And here's what I do. I think that, well, think about what happened in the 1990s during the crypto wars. The government in the early 90s introduced the Clipper chip, which was an encryption device that they hoped that companies that make secure phones would put into their phones. And in this device would be an encryption key that the government had a copy of in a vast government database. Every chip had a different key. And they would store this database and keep it around for wiretap purposes. Oddly enough, the Clipper chip was not politically popular. And so it never made it in the market. People didn't like using phones that were wiretap friendly. So I thought about this, and I thought, well, you know, at least we knew which phones had the Clipper chip. In fact, actually, I can only think of one. It was the AT&T 3600, which was first manufactured without the Clipper chip. In fact, I just used plain old DES. But then the NSA got all upset about it and offered to buy up all the ones that had used the DES chips and replace them with Clipper chips. And that's what they did. And so the AT&T 3600 was available after that with Clipper chips in it. But at least you knew that this phone here, made by AT&T, this model phone, this had a wiretap chip in it. And maybe some other secure phone didn't. And I think that's a good thing, you know, because I don't really care which phones have Clipper chips. I'm just going to choose, I want to let market forces decide. I think people will prefer to buy the ones that don't have wiretap-friendly chips. And so what I did with my protocol is I made a special flag in the protocol, in a packet, the confirm packet at the end of the protocol, that says whether the other side has made a copy of the session key and for, you know, to send it to the government or whatever you want to send, made a copy of it and stored it somewhere other than that what was needed for encrypting the call. Because, you know, some businesses have a legitimate need to monitor calls. Maybe a stock brokerage, for example, might record your call for the benefit of preventing insider trading or keeping their stockbrokers honest, or maybe you work in a high security area protecting, you know, nuclear weapons or something, and you just, you know, there's a need for them to monitor your calls, and that's fine. And I have a flag in the protocol that says that, okay, I'm sending you this packet with this flag, confessing that I have taken the session key and given it to someone else so that it could be wiretapped, or maybe just recorded and, you know, and decrypted later. And I don't see any problem with that. I don't think that's a bad thing. But I just want to see it in the which products have it and which products don't have it. It's kind of like putting a Clipper chip in the product. But I want to know which products have Clipper chips and which products don't have Clipper chips. Now, I know that CALEA, the law that says that you know, the phone companies have to hand over their keys to the government if the government asks them for it, they're not allowed to tell the user that they're wiretapping him on this call. I understand that. That's fine. But I think that not on a call-by-call level, but on a product-by-product level, we should know which products are wiretap-friendly and which products are not wiretap-friendly. Not call-by-call, but product-by-product. And then Adam Smith's unseen hand of the market, of the free market, can have its effect. People will buy the things that serve their needs. If they want to buy products that have wiretap capabilities built in, they can do it. And there will be plenty of businesses that need that, and they will buy those phones. But there will be some of us that would prefer not to buy them, and that's what I want. I want the freedom to choose in the market which ones to buy. And so what I did was I have a patent applied for. I don't know how long it will take to issue the patent, but someday it will issue. And I patented some of the ideas in this protocol, or I don't know if, I don't even know if I'll even grant the patent. But if they do, I've made a declaration in the IETF that says that in this protocol there may be some things that are covered by some patent that is applied for. And anyone can have a free license to this patent if they comply with the protocol. Well, Complying with the protocol means that you have to set that disclosure flag in the confirm packet. Are you seeing are you getting the drift here? What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to use the patent to enforce that companies that use this protocol to encrypt things have to disclose whether or not they have made the product in such a way that it will give up the key, or have they made the product in such a way that it won't give up the key, so that everyone can decide which products they want to buy. And so that's what I mean when I say I've discovered a way to use patents for good instead of evil. So I'm combining intellectual property law. Remember, I hate patents. I hate software patents. But I'm trying to use software. I also am for privacy, civil liberties, and encryption for protecting democracy. And in fact, I'm more interested in that than intellectual property issues. But what I'm using is I'm using the patent to enforce that companies that want to use this protocol have to set the disclosure flag truthfully if they are going to give up the key. Not on a call-by-call basis, that would violate CALIA, but on a product-by-product basis. That doesn't violate any laws. What do you think? Now, how many people here don't like software patents? Well, okay, good. I don't either. So I'm glad to hear people that don't like software patents think this is a good thing. Yeah. Well, that's a good question. How do you protect the keys from hostile software running on your computer? You know, that's been a problem with all kinds of encryption software. In fact, if you go back to the earliest PGP user's manual written in 1991, for the very first version of PGP, I warn against that. And I say that, if you don't have a trustworthy execution environment, it doesn't matter how much cryptography we've got. It's all for nothing. But that doesn't mean that we all throw up our hands and say, let's not use crypto anymore. We just try to find ways to protect our computers from hostile software. In fact, so much of the efforts that go into all these training sessions are about how to do just that, how to protect your machines and networks from attack. One thing you could do is just do it in hardware. I mean, I think that software VoIP clients are a temporary thing. I think that in the long run, people are going to want this to be built into every telephone. And the telephone is not your laptop computer. It's just a phone that's on your desk like the phone you have now, except it runs VoIP instead of PSTN. Now, that's got flash memory, and you don't update it very often. And when you do, it's some big thing you got to go through, and it's got digital signatures and all that stuff. So, I think that some environments are safe from hostile software, or could be made to be safe. Well, if somebody licenses my SDK to put it in the firmware of a hardware phone, then it's up to them to protect the hardware phone from hostile software. That's out of scope. I can't. There's nothing I can do in my protocol or in my SDK to stop that from happening. I just do what I know how to do. Yeah.
Getting back to your software patent issue, how do you continue to protect that disclosure bit after the patent protection expires?
Well, it's good for 20 years. Patents are, by that time I'll be getting old and we'll need to have some young whippersnapper to take over and find ways to protect democracy in the future. I'm doing what I can do. Yeah, in the white shirt. Secure key rollover? Well, these are ephemeral keys. They're created at the start of the call and just destroyed at the end of the call. So every call has a fresh key. There's no public key infrastructure, no persistent keys. Now we do hash the session key, or actually we hash something derived from the session key is derived from something that is also hashed into something that's stored for the next call. But that's not what you're talking about, I think. You're talking about persistent keys. Yeah.
I'm wondering exactly what Leah says, and that you have to notify on product by product. You're not allowed to notify on call by call. Because aren't you by flagging each transaction actually flagging call by call?
You're just flagging you're asking about the difference between call by call notification and product by product notification. What we're doing is we're saying that products that are built to be wiretap friendly have an obligation under this protocol to set this flag for all the every time they do a negotiation, they got to set the flag saying, I'm a product that is built this way, that is designed this way. It's not the same thing as saying that I'm actually disclosing this key right now for this call. Because most of the time, they're not disclosing the key right now for this call. They're just simply products that can do that are built to do that. It's just a way of allowing people to select which products they want for their environments. And there are some companies that are going to buy the ones that that do disclose the key because they have a need for it, like a stock brokerage or a financial institution. If the product is designed to do it, they have to set the flag. That way we avoid CALIA problems. Yeah?
Is CPhone primarily targeted at only protecting RTP as a protocol? Is it looked at as other protocols like IAX?
Well, it's designed for RTP, but, it's a key negotiation protocol. Its purpose is to negotiate a session key to be used for SRTP, which is the encrypted form of RTP. So once you negotiate those keys, you could use them for some other purpose. You could use them to encrypt IAX. But IAX right now is not designed very well for encryption. It's, I think it would be a good idea to sit down and carefully examine IAX and see what's the best way to make it more secure. And probably the key negotiation protocol could look a lot like ZRTP. But the low-level packet encryption would be low-level packet encryption that's appropriate for IAX. But I haven't done that yet. However, we are putting it in the Asterisk PBX because Asterisk PBXs are often used for just normal SIP RTP calls. And behind you right there in the red shirt? Louder, please. Well, yeah, that's what we do. I mean, let me explain what the man-in-the-middle attack is. Let's imagine that every phone, that you make some phones that have this protocol embedded in it. And let's just say they're hardware phones, okay? It's embedded in ROM, or flash memory. And you buy these at Walmart, and they cost, $100. So I have one of these phones. I bought it at Walmart, and so did you. But somebody else who wants to be a man in the middle and wiretap us, he went to Walmart and he bought 2 of these phones. Okay? So he gets between us and he somehow has intercepted the packets from me to you. He controls the routing or something. And he gets in the middle and he's got both of these phones on his desk. And on this side is the phone that will ring when I try to call you. Because it will, he's going to intercept it. So that phone rings, and he's got speed dial set to call you. As soon as he hears the phone ring, he hits the speed dial button to call you with his other phone. Remember, he bought 2 phones at Walmart. As soon as you answer, he picks up this one, and he takes the 2 phones, and he inverts one of them like this and puts them together in this sort of 69 configuration. And the earpiece and the mouthpiece are, right there. And there's an air gap in between, and he's listening to our conversation across the air gap. He doesn't know anything about the mathematics of public key cryptography. He doesn't know, he's never even heard of the Diffie-Hellman algorithm. He doesn't know anything about cryptography, but he does have $200 to go to Walmart and buy 2 phones. So that's how he acts as a man in the middle. How do you detect his presence? Well, my link to one of his phones is using a different session key than the connection between his other phone and you, because these session keys are random. I mean, they're randomly negotiated. The Diffie-Hellman negotiations are based on random keys. So the session keys are going to be random and they're going to differ. Well, how do you tell they're different? Well, what we do is we hash them and we display them on the display. And you could display them as hexadecimal digits, or actually, I often use base 32. It's a little more compact. So if you have 4 digits, it's 20 bits, which is a lot of bits. How many bits do you need to display? Well, I was displaying 2 words, and I don't know if you use PGP, but with PGP we have an alphabet for that. We have 256 different words. Each one means a different octet, and so 2 words is 16 bits. So if you have, just say, a 16-bit fragment of the hash of the session key, well, that's enough, But what about if the man in the middle knows that you're only going to display 16 bits? The man in the middle might have a lot of compute power at his disposal. Suppose, for simplicity, let's just say you were going to just display 1 byte. It's the first byte of the hash. And let's say you're just going to display 1 byte. Well, if the man in the middle knows you're going to display 1 byte, he can sit in the middle and calculate 256 different random Diffie-Hellman sessions in advance, and then present his Diffie-Hellman public parameter to me and to you in such a way that they would calculate the same first byte of the hash. And then the hash would match in the first byte, and then he would be able to fool us. So what's our alternative? We could display a long hash, but then it would be ergonomically unacceptable. Your mother is not going to like to use a phone that she has to display 160 bits of SHA-1, She's not going to like that. So what you want is something that can display a very short hash so that it's ergonomically acceptable. But you don't want him to make that massively parallel attack. Well, we display 16 bits, so we'd have to do 65,000 of these, which isn't that hard because everybody has access to, getting access to enough processing power to do 65,000 Diffie-Hellmans is not that hard. So how do you stop him? Well, the way you stop him is that you make sure that he doesn't know my Diffie-Hellman public parameter at the same time he knows your Diffie-Hellman public parameter. Because if he knows them both, he can calculate something that will satisfy this hash collision requirement. So instead of me sending you my Diffie-Hellman public parameter to start the protocol off, I send you a hash of it. I hash it first and send you the hash. And then after you get that hash, you send me your Diffie-Hellman public parameter. After I get your Diffie-Hellman public parameter, now I send you my real Diffie-Hellman public parameter. Not just a hash of it, but the real one. Remember, I just sent you a hash of it before. So you hash the real one and see if it matches the hash one I sent you in advance. And if it matches, then good, we proceed with the protocol. But what this means is the man in the middle doesn't know both of them at once. He knows the hash of mine before but he doesn't know my real Diffie-Hellman public parameter. So without knowing it, he can't do the kind of attack I described. So we force him to make only one guess. He's got to make just one guess. He can't make 65,000 different guesses until he finds the right one. He can only guess once, and he's got to get it right. And if he gets it wrong, we're going to catch him. So if we display 16 bits of hash, he's only got one chance in 65,000 of success. And that's a nice position for us to put him in, a bad position for him to be put in. He's not going to be insane enough to try a wiretap where he has only one chance in 65,000 of success. People that do wiretapping generally don't want to get caught. So these are impossibly pessimistic odds and so he's never going to try it. This is called hash commitment, and the ZRTP protocol uses hash commitment. And that's why the hashes can be so very short. We could have even displayed 1 byte, and then it would be 1 chance in 256 of success, which is still too pessimistic for the wiretapper. But we displayed 2 just to make people who really want to be sure. Yeah? Yeah. Well, I don't have a problem with one that does it on a session-by-session basis, but I think that to be in compliance with CALIA, that would violate CALIA, because CALIA says that you're not allowed to tell the participants of the call that they're being wiretapped. So, we can't do it that way. We're going to have to do it on a product-by-product basis. That way we can be in compliance with CALIA and still allow people to choose which products they use. Now, I predict that the market will encourage people to make products that don't disclose. I think that's fine. Yeah. That's why I did it, and that's why I have a patent on this. I don't like patents, but I'm going against my natural revulsion to software patents because I want to use patents for good instead of evil. The higher social purpose of protecting democracy. Yeah.
So what is done with this bit at the other side? Do all potential clients have to display some sort of this might be monitored or?
Yeah. You get the packet from the other side, and you can, presumably your user agent will display something that warns you.
So the packet is saying I must set this bit. In order for that to be useful, would all clients?
Well, remember, your user agent is something you bought yourself. You would buy one that would display something, If it doesn't, then don't buy it. Yeah. Talk louder, please. The phone at the other end would display something, that warns that party that the other party's possibly giving up his key. No, even phones that don't have the wiretap capability are going to rat out the other guy. That's what you want. You want to buy. If you generally don't like to have your phones wiretapped, you would buy a phone that would tell you when the other guy's doing it. Yeah. Yeah, it does require a handshake, but it is part of the protocol, so it is a handshake. There's no handshake, it's simply a disclosure. There is no handshake that does the disclosure. It's just that the phone that does the disclosure of the key to somebody, will also disclose to you that it's doing it. No, both phones are simply using the ZRTP protocol. And a requirement of the ZRTP protocol is that if you're going to give up the key, you got to tell the other party. Now, that means that that not on a call-by-call basis again, but on a product-by-product basis. If you're designed to give up your key, you got to tell the other party. Most soft VoIP clients probably are not going to be designed to give up the key. Because if they did, nobody would buy them. Yeah, in the back there. What? Yeah, that's a matter of traffic analysis. And my protocol does nothing to protect the traffic patterns. In fact, John Callis here is going to give a nice talk about the difficulty of protecting traffic patterns. It's very hard to do. And John is going to explain to you why. You know, a lot of people are interested in protocols like Tor that are using a lot of intermediaries to try to disguise who's talking to who. But it's pretty hard to do because when you have a real-time protocol like telephone calls, it's more difficult. You can sequester email for a few days while you bounce it around a few times and try to hide where it's going. And eventually it'll pop out the other end. You might be able to do it there the longer you keep it hidden. But with phone calls, there's a real-time requirement. And so with phone calls, it's much more difficult to know the timing and size of the traffic. If you can look at both endpoints, you can figure out who's calling who. I'm sorry, John. I think I just gave away some of your material. Okay. Yeah. Besides zPhone, what other projects am I working on? Well, this one's taking up a lot of my psychic energy. I think this is a really fun project. I mean, you know, I'd already done, you know, email encryption a long time ago, and I'm kind of I'm more interested in phone calls. In fact, I wanted to do phone calls before even I wanted to do email encryption. I would have done it years ago, except the technology wasn't ready. In fact, actually, in 1995, I did do it, but the internet wasn't ready then. Nobody had broadband, and there were no VoIP standards. But it's the perfect time to do it now. And I'm going to stick with this one for a while until it gets widely accepted. And then maybe I'll work on global warming or something. Yeah? Well, the bump in the wire would display the short authentication string, and you would look at it and read it aloud to the other party. It's not the only way you can do it, though. I mean, the protocol does allow you to use digital signatures if you've got a PKI already installed in your organization, and it's up and running, and you don't have to go through any extra trouble, and you've already got it. Then the ZRTP protocol allows you to digitally sign the short authentication string and send it to the other party, so it could be done automatically. I put that in because I know that there are a few customers out there that already have PKIs. I generally don't like PKIs because I've seen how many companies died trying to build PKIs. But if you've already got one and you've already paid the blood, sweat, and tears to build it, then more power to you. You can use it if you got them. Smoke them if you got them, you know. The protocol allows for that. Yeah. You know, it's not much resource because there's a little burst of calculation at the beginning to do the Diffie-Hellman, just like any public key calculation. If your math library is fast, which it is, I mean mine is, because I use the same one that PGP uses, by no small coincidence. Or it's not a coincidence at all. But anyway, it's fast. And the other thing is the encryption of the voice packets, but that takes almost no time. The codecs take far, far more resources than the encryption. Compression is just far slower than encryption. In fact, if you have a fast enough processor to run a codec, that's plenty to do the Diffie-Hellman at the beginning. Yeah. Well, you know, this protocol, the question is, why is this protocol better than other key management protocols? This one's purpose-built for VoIP. And, you know, the IETF is looking at other protocols for VoIP. And in fact, you could use IKE, for example. You could use IPsec. But I think that IPsec is wrong for encrypting VoIP because it's too low in the protocol stack. You really need to be able to tell the user the call's encrypted, or he's not going to feel comfortable enough to talk about anything except the weather. So IPsec is so far down. There's nothing in the protocol that will tell the upper layers that there's encryption going on. Maybe the other endpoint doesn't have IPsec. So and the IETF is looking at another encryption protocol that's based on TLS. But I think that TLS is a fine protocol for having a web browser talk to a web server. That's what it was built for. But I don't think it's a good protocol for, VoIP encryption. I think that what you've got with VoIP encryption is you have a unique opportunity to use the real-time connection between two human beings. Human beings. That, if you look at all the things that go on, all these attacks on trying to make secure connections between a web browser and a web server, they're not really assuming two human beings, But phone calls generally are two human beings. Or if they're not, if it's an answering machine, you're probably not going to talk about really secret stuff to an answering machine. Not because the encryption might be weak, or maybe it's not encrypted. That's not the reason. You don't say secret stuff to an answering machine because you're afraid that somebody besides the person you wanted it to hear it will listen to the recording. So generally speaking, the time that you really need to have encryption is when you're talking to another human being. And so my method of authenticating the call, of making sure that there's no man in the middle, is something that really works well when there's two human beings. It naturally uses the organic human component. You've got two processors that are capable of, 100 trillion calculations per second at both ends. Why not use them? Yeah. Oh, well, Zphone has its own separate GUI from the VoIP client, and it displays in that GUI the short authentication string. So it is operating at the application level, but it's doing other stuff down below. But, if it's integrated into the VoIP client, then it's at the application level. I don't really see a problem with that. I mean, it's really designed to work at the application level. We just have it work at the lower layer with Zphone because it's a cool way to do it, I mean, the fact that we don't have to be in the VoIP client means that we can deploy today without having to wait for the VoIP client to put it in, which could take a long time because... Well, but IPsec doesn't do that now. And if you wanted to do it, you could do it. But remember, IPsec is not designed for human-to-human communication. It's designed for computer-to-computer communication between an FTP server and, some other computer. Yeah, but generally speaking, you're using IPsec to talk to a server that has no human. VoIP is something between two human beings. And that specifically is what I designed this protocol to address. That's what I mean by purpose-built. And that's why other protocols, rewarming over old protocols to try to make them work this way, you're just not going to have something as cool as this protocol. This protocol is specifically designed for two organic brains to talk to each other. Yeah, and right there. Could you talk a lot louder?
Sorry. I'm wondering if your API covers random number generation, skewing, and that sort of thing. And as somewhat related question, how your patent protection would actually apply to something like a deliberate choosing of PP.
Well, if one side is not doing what they're supposed to do, then you're lost. Remember, okay, think about this. Remember when Monica Lewinsky was talking to Linda Tripp? Okay, do you think Monica Lewinsky would have been better off if she'd been using a military-grade secure telephone to talk to Linda Tripp? If Linda Tripp is not trustworthy, then all is lost. And so you've got to assume that both sides are going to try to generate good random numbers, because if they don't, then you can't, I mean, if the other guy, you can't trust him, you can't trust him. Well, I use a cryptographically strong random number generator that that gathers, you give it some entropy from the environment. If it happens to be running on a Linux platform, it uses dev-urandom, but it can also sample microphone noise and mix that in to get good entropy. And you can download the source code and take a look at it if you'd like. Now, the SDK is just an SDK. It's not the VoIP client. And so it's up to the VoIP client to supply microphone noise. But even if it doesn't, if it's running on a Linux platform and it has a properly implemented dev-urandom, then it will get its entropy from that. But, we tell our customers, our OEM customers, that they're going to have to come up with some entropy somewhere to feed this. Once they give us some entropy, we don't care, even the entropy doesn't even have to be great entropy. As long as there's a couple hundred bits of it, we're going to be fine. Because we hash it, and then we run it through a cryptographically strong generator. We run AES in counter mode, supplying it with a key and a counter that was derived from a hash of possibly low-grade entropy, as long as there is enough entropy in it to get us started. I think that doing it the weak key way is not a good way to do it. If you were, then what's going to happen if you have widespread deployment of products that have weak random number generators, and some of those products are bought and used by judges and prosecutors who are wiretapped by organized crime, and their families attacked by hardened criminals who are violent people because they want to not go to jail. We have to recognize that as we migrate from the PSTN to VoIP, we are going to have strong encryption. Now, to weaken that by saying, okay, let's just use weak keys, I think is a bad way to do it. Because you're going to, not only are you're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, you're going to damage society as a whole if you have people. Well, I think that eventually somebody would find out that these products are generating weak keys, and there would be a market response to that. Well, there are test suites that you can use for testing random number sequences, but I find that it's usually not very useful because it's very tough to distinguish between good random numbers and bad random numbers if you're generating them with a cryptographic mechanism. If I make the product myself, I can see to all that and make sure it works. But if I'm selling an SDK to other people, I don't know what the quality of the entropy is going to be. If you worry about that, I'd recommend that you buy products from me. And I'll publish all of the source code, not just the SDK. Okay, I think that's about it.